If birds feel intimidating, today's video is for you. Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. My name is Jessica, and today I'll share 3 simple ways to create lifelike feathers, starting from loose and free to more tight and controlled. I'll build these up in layers and show you how using my 2-brush technique can simplify your process and help you achieve beautiful texture in your work. Later in the video, I'm going to also share what inspired me to paint this piece for Easter, but for now, let's start practicing some of our feather techniques. All right, so we're going to go ahead and practice some techniques on a smaller piece of paper first. I am still using Arch's 140-pound cold press because that's the same paper I'm going to be doing my final painting on, and you want the paint and the paper to behave the same in order to get the most comfortable with your practice techniques. So I'm going to start out with more wet on wet and then work towards wet on dry. So I have my 2 brushes, and what I'll be doing is coming in with water first, and I'm going to just tint it for my sample here. When I paint my bird, I'm going to use clear water, but so you can see what I'm doing, I'm just going to like slightly tint it brown and show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in here first, and I'm going to just do a few really light strokes. And again, like I say, this is going to be in water when I work on my bird, but I just do a few strokes in the direction of the feathers. Then I'm coming in with a slightly darker color, or more concentrated color rather, of the same brown. And I'm going to like tap, and again, I'll be working lighter than this. I'm just showing you the sample a bit darker so it's easier to see. I'll be kind of coming in and tapping in some of the color to get kind of like a wet on wet sort of mottled look to start with. And in some cases, I'll have more water, some cases I'll have less. And I can always add a little water if I want to blend it further. But I'm kind of leaving some areas where there's slight bits of dryness so I get a bit of texture. So that's more of my wet on wet technique, and I'm using 2 brushes for it. Then when I want to work a little bit more like wet on dry but blended, you'll see I come in with some of my same color, and I'll be using both my bluish color and the brownish color to do this on the bird. But this is the second technique I'll use, and that is kind of like an in-between technique. So I'll be doing a few little feathers with 1 brush, then I come in with my water brush and kind of soften and tap them. So that's technique number 2. So it's kind of like a wet on dry, but softening with the second brush. So that's how I'm using my 2-brush technique. And oh, one other quick tip. If you're having a hard time with these little feathers, you can use a smaller brush. You can also just take your Simply Simmons brush, tap it off, tap some of the water off, and then squeeze it just to the tip so that it's kind of like a chisel like that. You can use it, you might get a little bit better detail in your feathers. You can see I'm getting better detail right away by having pinched it like that. Or you can rub it sometimes on the edge of your palette. Pinching tends to work pretty good for these details, and then soften. And then finally, in a few places, I'll just be working wet on dry. And most of the time when I work just wet on dry, I'll be using the smallest brush. This is my number 3 Artegria round. And I'll just be doing tiny strokes with it. Maybe not always as dark as this, but sometimes I'll dilute it. You can see you can add a little water, tap it off. You can get lighter feathers too, but you can see I get very, very fine feathers. So I'm kind of going to be working in the order of more loose to a little tighter until finally I'm working tight like this. And I can also, you can soften any of these, right? If you're like, you know, I don't want them that hard edged, you can even soften that one as well. But a lot of the time when I get to that smaller brush, probably just be doing it wet on dry and not softening. But softening is an option. Otherwise, just leave it hard like that. So there's a quick overview of our techniques. Now for a quick word on the outline for this painting, you can find this on my Etsy shop. It does come with multiple sizes, so you can print the one you'd like. I'm working at an approximately 5x7 size, and you're gonna notice that I painted all these little flowers quite loosely in the video. I did trace those out in case you want to have the same shapes as me, but there's no need to work with those shapes. If you'd rather just paint loose with your brush, similar to the way I do mine, and get flowers that are a little bit unique to you, you can totally do that because this is a looser painting in the background, but these will be on the outline if you would like to use mine. And I'll include a link to the Etsy outline in the description below. So I'm going to start out for the feather colors. I've got the brown color mixed in my palette, and so this is what the brown looks like. I'll show you a little more concentrated. It can get pretty dark because it's dried out my palette. And then I have this kind of bluey purple color as well. So I'm going to mostly use it kind of with that light shade, but every now and then I'll probably drop a little bit more darkness. Might even throw a little more blue in it if I need to get kind of a blackish color. I'll start with it like this, and then I can always play with it as I go. And I have my Simply Simmons 6 and 8 round, and then I do have some round Artegria as well. I've got the 8, 6, and 3. So I'll probably kind of rotate through all of those as I go. I'll start out with the Simply Simmons and then I'll switch over. And I want to get really loose to get started here. So I'm just going to drop some water in it, and I'm not filling the whole bird in. I'm just like kind of doing a few stripes, kind of in the direction of the feathers. Probably, I don't know if you can see the shine there, but you'll see it in a minute here as I add a little bit of paint into this, and it's going to give us kind of a soft brown. So I'll just kind of come in here and just start dropping a little bit, and then I will drip more water in as I go. You can see that's pretty dark right in here. I don't want it quite so dark, so I'm just going to kind of scrub along with a little bit more water on my brush. I'll probably try and alternate between the two brushes. I happen to just pick up the 8 and start dropping, but you can see I'm not filling in every single little nook and cranny. You can see I've kind of almost like left a slight bit of like every now and then a little bit of light or dry paper, so you get these little specks of lightness coming through. It gets a little bit darker down here. I put a little bit more. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use my water and then spread it out. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to my 2-brush technique with my smaller brush for the paint, as I like to do in my florals. I'm going to do that a little bit here. You can see sometimes I haven't maintained any dryness. It's just wet on wet, so that's okay. I'm going to be coming in with more detail. I'll just come in here now. You can see I'm getting a little bit more detail. So yeah, I'll try and stick with the 6 for the paint. Water will be the number 8 brush, and I'll see as I go. I might do a little bit of back and forth, but working with the 2 brushes gives me a little bit of freedom to just keep dropping and playing. You can see sometimes I'm getting a wet on wet look. Sometimes I'm kind of getting like mixed edges. Sometimes they're more diffused, and just dropping that in there. Okay, that brown there is a little bit slightly different, and that's okay. I like that. So I think I'm pretty happy with that main area on the bird. So let's go ahead and do the same thing, except maybe over here I'll go with a little bit more brown to start with and then soften. So I'll kind of go in the direction of these little feathers still, but then I'll use my water brush and kind of tap. Probably wouldn't matter if I even go more wet on wet with this lower layer, and then I'll add a little more detail after. So you can see I'm going back and forth between my water and paintbrush, depending on how much texture I want versus how much of a nice, soft, kind of diffused wash I want at the beginning. Try and get a little bit of the feathering happening at the edges. We're going to get more of this later. Like I say, I want to start loose and then tighten up as I go. So we're just basically like combing the feathers in the direction that we can see them growing. It's very light under here, so my paintbrush is almost out of paint, which is a good thing. I don't want too much pigment there. Like that. Okay, let's just go ahead and do a nice soft wash everywhere for his wing, because you can see there's almost like really no white areas over here. It's just kind of a soft tan color, so let it bleed if it wants to into the other feathers. They're dry enough, they're not really getting that, so I'll just go a little bit like this and a little bit more. You could probably use any brush over here. I'm just sticking with the Simply Simmons because I'm happy with how it's working. Okay, over here it gets a little bit lighter. You can see I'm basically just doing a wash of color. Kind of in here, and then as it's starting kind of to dry, I'll probably get a little bit of interesting edges happening, so I'll just guide it around with my brush. Because if it does anything like blooming or anything, I'd rather have the texture of the feathers, but it's actually just blending in. Sometimes you don't know till you get there. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to put a really light wash over the beak too. Again, my brush is like running out of paint. That's a good time to come in and do these lighter areas. And I think I'm going to call that good for the first layer. I'm going to put a little bit of that same brown very softly into our branch here. Maybe even into the legs and the feet. Let's come in here. I'll go around them for now, and then I'll come back in after. I might end up getting them darker than the branch, but I'll see as I go. Just fill this in, and I'm working around the flowers that I've drawn on here. And why don't we do a few little sprigs or branches coming off that come up into the blossoms here. So nothing fancy, not a whole lot of rhyme or reason for what I'm doing, just creating a little bit of variety. Do a little bit of something over here. Maybe make it kind of join somewhere back here. Something like that. Need to get that branch a little bit thicker so it makes sense, right? And since this is drying, I wonder if we can add just a little bit of pink into our cherry blossoms. I've got some quinacridone rose in this palette here, and I think I'm just gonna take a little bit on my brush and use it and just do some really soft washes of pink. I'll have to be careful because the bird is wet. If you want to wait and do your little petals later, that's totally fine too. So I'm just gonna fill them in with this gentle, delicate wash of quinacridone rose. And I'll put a little bit more in the center of the flowers. For now, I'm just gonna come in. You know what I might even do? I have this color over here that's kind of a slightly dull, kind of pinky color. That would have quinacridone rose, a little bit of phthalo blue, and you could probably put a tiny, tiny touch of Hansa Yellow Deep just to kind of tone it down, but it's kind of more of like a purpley color. I'm going to drop a little bit of that into these too, and I might even use it a little bit because it's just a little more muted, a little bit softer. I feel like I'm too much pigment right now on my brush. I'm going to try and just go with a little bit more water. And you can see I'm being very loose. I'm not filling these in the way I usually would with as much control because I just want loose, simple flowers. And I'm not liking how much pink I've got in here. So I'm just going to tap it off and just drop some water in because, you know, usually I like to start with like a wet on wet clear wash. And so this to me feels too dark already. So I'm just going to put a little bit less of that color. And then I'll come down here, just fill this in loosely. And then I'll drop more pink in. I'll be happier with it that way. Might even come back and forth between the two pinks. We'll see. Ooh, that's really dark. And that's okay. That can be folded over. I'm just going to put a lot of water on my brush I've got over here. Water. I'm just going to fill the rest in with water. Like I say, I'll drop more darks in after. I don't want to go too crazy too soon with dark pinks. So I'm almost doing a wet on wet because you can barely see the pink there, right? And then I'll just drop some of this into the centers of these. And we will get a few more details after. This is just a soft, basic start. Okay, I'll put a little bit of that in there. I'm liking that. These ones will be a little darker back here, and that's okay. Yeah, I'm liking that. I'm just gonna guide this. Do we guide it around or just let it do its thing? It's kind of pretty. You know, I'm a little bit of a control freak here, right? Let's just put a tiny little bit. Yeah, we're gonna leave it like that. I like that. And I don't mind those ones being a bit darker. I'm gonna just put a very soft amount and just maybe add a couple little blossoms over here, just because I can. Feels like it needs a little something. And you can see I'm just using my brush and I'm not even really getting perfect petal shapes. Those are more just like petals. And then I'll just drop a little bit of pink in them. So maybe they're like buds. I don't know. I don't mind just a little abstract shape back there. Usually, you know, I'm a little more detailed, but I want this one to be a little bit loose and just more free and simple. So I'm not being quite as realistic as I sometimes am with those blossoms. Okay, well, since it's still wet, why don't we just go ahead and add a little green. And for greens, I kind of like the greens I had over here. They're just a little bit more dull. So let's see, something like that. I'm going to use a little bit of that color and just put a few little leaves in really quick. And again, I'm just going to paint them with kind of like one stroke. And some of them I'll go a little lighter, so I'm dipping into my water. So I got more water, less paint. I'm just, again, trying to be a little more loose, less controlled here, less contrived. I'm going to join those together a little bit with some green stems, and then we can always add, if we need brown later, we can. I'd rather err on the side of light to start with, because I can always darken things or add some shadows later. But if I go too dark at the beginning, as you know, we're stuck with that. So trying to figure out where to put these little leaves so that they're, I feel like I'm getting a little dark again, aren't I? Let's dip some more water onto my tip of my brush, and so I can go a little looser. And you can see I'm not even fully following my outline. The outline was a guide because I find I like a little bit of a guide. Well, one, the bird, I wanted more detail to give me a guide to start with. And then if I want to add the odd little leaf or play around, I can, but at least I've kind of got the basic outline here to guide me. Let's add a little bit here, lighten that up. I'm gonna be careful. I don't want to deviate too much from my original composition because, as you know, I need it. But I want to just kind of fill in the spaces where it feels like it needs a little something. Okay, maybe just a few little leaves here. I don't want to overdo. Really don't. But feels like it needs a little something that feels like it's blank or missing something over here. Could even probably go a little darker with this leaf and put it on top of the branch a bit too. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dry this, and then I'll come back and add another layer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and add some of the more blue feathers into here. And I'm almost wondering, before I even start, if I don't want to put just a tiny bit more of the phthalo blue into this purple color, just so that it's a little more on the blue side. Let's see, because it is kind of blue if you look in that reference photo. So over here, I've mixed a little bit of the blue into here, right? Phthalo blue into this dark purple that I had. You can see it's gotten a little more blue, and I can rinse it, and you can see, yeah, I think I like that a little bit better. So I'm going to go with that. This would be fine too. I'll probably end up with a little bit of both going, just because I didn't mix the whole thing up. I've got a little more blue on this side, but I'm still going to have a little bit of that purple too. I'm going to go once again and kind of do the same sort of thing where I put a few little, almost you could say, clear feathers, just water feathers, not too much. There's very little there. And then I'm going to come in with this color and just drop. I'm going to start down here because I feel like there is quite a bit of blue down here. I'm going to look at my reference photo and just kind of go along doing these little feathers, just short little strokes. And they kind of almost automatically soften a bit because there is water down here, right? There's a little bit of water. It's not drowning in water, but the water's there. You can see where I'm coming in a little bit denser or where things are a bit dry. It's getting a little too dark. So then I just come in with my water brush and tap a little bit and soften. And there's surprises along the way because I sometimes will land in areas where there's less water, areas where there's more. I'm just kind of playing with it again, just in this area here. I'll be coming darker with my browns. So right now it probably looks overly blue, and that's okay. I won't be putting as much blue in the upcoming layers. Okay, let's just put a little bit more around here. I feel like there's a bit of a transition that happens. And as I work, I'm getting less and less paint on my brush, right? So I'm getting less blue because the paint is kind of running out. All right, I see a little bit darkness down here. I do like that blue. It just adds a little something. I think it's pretty. I like having colors kind of interact with each other. You could just do this all browns. There's no reason you have to tap in blues, but I just like the look. So I'm just gonna come a little bit down here and maybe a little bit right along here. There's a shadow. So I'll come in with it, and yes, we will be getting more brown. So this isn't gonna really show fully, but I'll just put a little bit down here. Tap it. I'm seeing a little bit up in the forehead, not too much. I'm going to be going more with brown, but because I'm going to be going darker brown on top, I'm going to just put a little bit of this on now wet on dry. So I'll put it on wet on dry and then just soften it a bit with my brush. So that ends up getting a little wet on wet because I'm coming in where I was wet, right? So it's a blend. I kind of started wet on dry, but as soon as I start introducing water and then coming back on with paint, we're working wet on wet. A little bit of that there. And yes, this is where we're going to be coming a lot darker with our browns. So don't worry about how blue this is looking. I'm going to put some blue here too. I feel like I see it running dry now. Things are looking kind of scratchy. Okay, I'm going to use less water as I blend. Tap my brush off a bit, a little more control. Maybe a little bit more blue, a little more water. Yes, it's wet on wet here, so it's a little bit more diffused because I'm coming in with my water and then my paint and then my water and my paint. Just a little bit more along here. And just a little bit here. You can see it's almost lighter in some areas, so I don't want to overdo this blue color. But I like that touch of the color. All right, why don't I put a little bit of blue on the beak? I'm feeling like the shadow here could be a little bit bluish. I don't have as much. Again, my brush is getting a little bit less concentrated as I go. I'm just gonna put a little bit of blue just like there. And then I'll come back in and kind of tweak it with browns, and the eye is gonna have some darker colors. All right, so now I'm gonna come into these more detailed feathers and just put another layer of brown. This is not my final touch or my final coat. I'm just gonna do a little bit of brown and then soften the edge and just kind of fill in the areas that I'm seeing are a little darker. And I'll leave the areas that are lighter. You know what? I think this whole area almost needs more dark. Even this light section here still could get darker. So there we go. We're just gonna put a lot more brown into this. So I'm just coming on wet on dry and then softening it. It allows me to just have that tiny little bit more control rather than just coming on wet. So just add a little more water to my brush. All this is really just a second coat of dark, just so that we get a little darker. I'll come down here on the tail, get a little darker on the tail now. I'll do a few little feathers and then soften them. I think I'm gonna just put a light coat. I'm just gonna soften this whole tail so he's got just a very light brown everywhere. We can even tap a little more darkness down here. This is not as dark as we're getting. We will work wet on dry afterwards, but we can get a little more darkness. Just coming in with my dark brown and just putting a very small amount kind of on the tip of my brush and then just blending. I see a nice dark area here. And pretty soon I'll switch brushes and work a little bit more wet on dry so that we get a little more detail. Why don't we tap a little more brown into his head now, since we can. Just gonna come in here. I'm gonna work wet on dry for a minute, and then I will use my water brush and kind of guide things a little bit or soften things. Just bring it up to the beak. I'm kind of running out of paint, so I'm automatically able to just soften things with my brush, so it's less brown. And I'm going to try and get a little bit of these feathers coming down the side of his head and his body. So you can see I kind of keep adding water to this little bit of brown paint over here, and just using it somewhat tentatively. I'm going to come closer to his eye. There's a little bit of lightness in some areas, so I'll have to be careful not to get too dark. Okay, so I'm just gently tapping. And you can always do a little bit of pinching if you want to make this have a little bit more of a sharp kind of edge to it as you do this, but we will move into smaller brushes and that will help too. But if you don't have a smaller brush and you have something like this, you can, like I say, you can just do that, and it will give you a pretty reasonable tip, even though this is a size 6. The benefit of using a bigger brush, not that a size 6 is a big brush, but it's not a tiny brush either. The benefit of sticking with it for as long as it does actually help you to avoid being too controlling. It does kind of get a little bit of a looser, wider stroke in some ways, and then you can come in just when you're ready for the detail. It's kind of like this fine line between how much detail is, well, it's kind of a personal choice, we'll put it that way, but I wanted to kind of give it a looser finish. So I'm wanting to not over feather too soon, especially in the parts of his body that don't matter as much. Just soften that a little bit. And come a little bit more in here. Again, just the same brown on my brush. Okay, soften. I think what I'm going to do is just come in and just do a little bit of feathers with the water on my brush with a bit of brown, so it's more diluted. And I'm just going to add just almost like I don't know if I want to say a wash, but just a little bit more brown and soften it, because I feel like he's almost too blue. And I'm not going to put a ton more brown details down here because I don't think these details matter as much. Just put a little bit more there. Let's go a little bit more down here. You can see it's kind of wet still, right? Sometimes I'm getting wet on wet, and sometimes it's a little bit wet on dry, and then I'm softening. So for the most part, I'm pretty loose still down here. Making the choice to not make this part the most detailed part of the painting. You want more details on his head. Okay, wet on dry for a few minutes here. And then I'll be softening. Just get pretty dark down here, but there's a little bit more of the blue color. Okay, just soften a little bit. And then let's just put a little bit of that brown into his legs and his feet. So just come in here, give yourself a little case of the shakes. So that you don't go too smooth. He does have texture, right? Their little toes or whatever, they kind of bumpy. Yeah, I'll just fill this in and then I'll come in and add details later. I think I'll go darker with the feet. And why don't we just do a really light coat? His beak is probably dry enough. We can put a little bit of this brown here. I'm going to put it kind of along the bottom and under here. And then I'm going to just soften with my water brush. Kind of lost the tip of his beak a little bit there. That's okay. I'll come back in and get some final details with a smaller brush. So basically I went darker kind of where the beak opens, and then I've softened it top and bottom because I see lighter areas there. Then I think what I'll do is dry it, and then I can come in and actually start refining things, adding some more detail, and use a smaller brush. All right, so what I'm going to do is work in this area here, and I'll probably go back and forth between the number 3 Artegria and the 6, and I'll decide which one I use. I might use the 6 for water, but I also have the 8 here as well. And I'll try and work larger when I can, just to keep myself from getting overly picky with the details, but I know there are some details I'm going to want the 3 for. So we'll see. I'm starting with the 6, and then we'll go from there. So I'm just going to come in here and just kind of drop. Okay, I'm adding more water to this. And just drop some of this brown in here so to get a little bit more. And I'm just going to come kind of along the bottom of these. Just get a smidgen darker, and then just kind of come up along the edge here of his neck a little bit. Just kind of do a little bit tapping to get a little bit of feathering. And then I might drop a few tiny touches of the dark, but I'm actually going to do more of this kind of like wet on wet after. So just kind of a mottled look for now. That's all I'm doing there. Then with what I have on my brush, I might add a little more water because I think I'm a bit concentrated. I'm going to come in and do these little stripes. So, well, they're feathers, parts of his wing. I'm going to see if I can come in here and just do each one kind of like so. And if I need to go smaller, or if you need to go smaller brush, you can. And I'm not worrying about perfectly copying. I'm just doing my best to kind of fill these in kind of with the direction of these little feathers. Again, if it matters to you that they're perfect, you can definitely be a little more controlled here. I'm trying to let go of perfectionism for this project. Okay, so I'm going to come along this top edge a little bit, just tap my brush off a bit and just kind of bring this in so we get kind of a nice edge along here. Define those a little bit. And I'll just come up here. And then this area is really dark. I might just leave it and get it darker after. Put a little bit more here. Okay, I'm going with a little bit more brown for this little section here. And again, I'm not going to worry about every little getting every single little line here. I'm just gonna, oops, that's too brown. I'm just gonna come in here and just kind of approximately draw in where those lines are, like so. Okay, I'm gonna smooth that out because I went a little bit, I'm gonna lighten that. That went a lot dark for where it is in the picture. Just lift it a little bit, let that kind of bleed into here. And then these shapes, these get quite dark, so I'm gonna let them be. I'll go darker in a minute here. And just come in here. Again, that's pretty loose. You can see not too perfect. And then in here, I might come in and do a few feathers with the tip of the brush. Maybe soften them again with my number 8. Just a bit. I don't want a ton of detail on the tail. It's actually pretty blurred out in the photo, and I'm good with that because I want to bring the attention more to his face anyways. Less detail on the tail. Okay, it gets quite dark under here. So I'm going to tap and get more concentrated paint. You're going to see we're getting really dark in here. So I'm going to come dark along the bottom. This is the darkest we've gone so far. And into this area of his tail. It's quite dark. Something like that. And let's do a little bit of feathers while I've got this dark color in my brush. A little bit here. And again, we'll soften. And try and move along. Just going to put more water onto my brush. I'm just going to tap just a few really loose feathers along the edge here. Just a tiny bit. Not much. And then I think I'll come in with a smaller brush and start doing a little bit of detail on his head. So I'm going to use this brown to start with. And this is the number 3, Artegria. And it's going to give me a lot of fine detail. And that's okay. I'm okay with detail on his head. So I'm going to just, oh, it's almost too dark. So I'm just going to come in. I'm doing the same motion, but I'm going more wet on dry. And I'll see if I soften or not. I've got my 6 brush I can use for softening. Or I might just do these details and let them just stay as is. Lots of tiny little strokes. And bring it up to the beak. The beak still needs more detail, yes. I'm going to put more of this color. You can see he's got this darker section right here. And yes, I'm being detailed right here. And I think I'm okay with that because of where it is on his head. A little bit down here. Just going darker. Could almost put a little bit of the bluey color in here too. But for now, we'll just kind of get these darker areas on his head. And dip in the water. This little brush runs out of water fast because it holds more water being soft, but because it's so small, the smallness keeps it from holding as much water, if that makes any sense. If you had a size 3 and a firmer brush, it would be holding less, but I'm not used to working with such a small brush. I'm getting more and more enjoying the little 3, but I do find it runs out of paint faster just due to its small size. Okay, coming down here. There we go. I think I'm okay with that. I'm going to come around his beak and put a little bit more detail around there. And even his eye, you can kind of see his eye has like almost like a dark ring around it in some areas. We need to fill that eye in too. Like I say, we need to get it on there. But since I got the brown on the go, I'll just continue working a few more of these feathers on his head. This is where I'm being more detailed. You'll see that. You're like, okay, definitely. You see him going really, really tiny details for this. And I'm just going to repeat that all the way down his body, just kind of not too many. I don't want to go as many details as I've gone on his head, but I do want a little something. So I'm just going to come work my way down his body, and then I'll come back over into his wing. And if I do something like that where it's too dark, I'll just tap it a little bit with my water. Otherwise, I'll just add water to my brush. Over here again, I dip the tip. I can't say that. I dip the tip in, and then I can just add a few feathers here and there. Here I'm a bit wet because I just wet that. So just do a little bit of this with this brush. And so I'll do that first with the brown. And if I need to soften it all, I'll soften with my number 6. Then I'll come in with the bluey color and just add a very few feathers as well with that. This is a bit of a different approach to an Easter painting this year, but this painting was inspired by an old hymn I've had on my heart recently called "His Eye is on the Sparrow." The last few weeks have been full of ups and downs in my plans and schedule, and my natural reaction is to overreact, panic, try and fix things, control things, especially the timing of how I want things to be accomplished. And honestly, that way of living, it ruins my peace, it steals my joy. And this song has been just a gentle reminder to me that the Lord sees and He cares, and that He's got me, and He holds my times in His hands. And really, that hope and assurance is something I have because of Easter. Because Jesus died for my sin, He restored my relationship to God as my loving Heavenly Father. And because He rose again, I have hope that He's working all things together for my good, and that one day He's going to make all things new. And the thing that's so beautiful about it all is that it's a free gift that He offers to anyone who comes to Him with simple faith. I'm going to use a diluted amount of that blue on his forehead just to create a bit of harmony. I feel like his head is almost like disconnected from his body for the color. So I'll just tap a few little of these diluted little feathers up here, and you can see it's bringing some harmony into this painting, right? A little bit of that bluish color is helping, and I'll just put a few taps of it. You can see I'm pretty diluted. I'm not working as strong as what you can see in my palette. And then when I need to add a little water, you can see I do that too. Don't love this. Got to work on that quick. Scrub that out. Okay, it's going to be okay. I went a little too dark there. You can see. It's okay. I'll come back in here later and add maybe just a few details if I feel like I need them. Otherwise, I'm much happier with his forehead. I'm going to make sure this is dry before I come in and do his eye, because we don't want to do anything bad to that or have it kind of bleed, right? So I'm going to come in and do this beak. I'll do the line here. Tap a little bit of bluey over here. Just a little bit more, and then I'm going to blend it a little bit with my number 6 brush. And then I'm going to do the same thing with a little bit of brown so that it's a little bit more harmonized, and I can come with a little bit, just go right on top of that blue. And it's wet now, so it's bleeding, which is more what I want. I could almost put some of the pinky color in there. I'm not sure. I might just leave it like this. We'll see. Let's put a little bit of brown down here. Soften. Yes, I'm using the same brush this time. That part is kind of a bit darker underneath. I'm just going to leave his beak now for a minute. And I think I'm dry enough. I can probably come in and do final details to the feathers. So we'll see, I'm going very dark now, and I'm using this tiny brush. And I can't see the exact lines where I had them on the outline, and that's okay. I'll just kind of eyeball. I can actually look at my outline a little bit. Just draw a few of these in here. They don't have to be perfect, and I'm kind of inclined myself to let them sit for just a minute and then kind of soften them a little bit, because I don't want them to be too stark. If you like them a little hard-edged, you can, but I'm just using my water brush, which again, in this case, when I'm working tiny, I'm using my number 6 for water. I'm just kind of softening that out a little bit. I think I like that better. And I can see a dark shape here. So now I'm actually going to be a little bit more precise. I'm looking at the photo, and I'm just looking to see where I see a little bit of darkness. I don't want to go overboard with the detail, but I'll put a little bit more detail on here, just a touch. So I'll come in here. I'm going to come in here and just drop some of the brown in, and then I'll soften. So again, I want to be fairly concentrated, just putting it at the very far left side of each of these little sections. And just paint that on fairly quick. Again, I'll kind of join them at the top because I want to have A little bit of an edge here. Just kind of tap that down, bring it, whoops, kind of botching it a little bit. That's okay. I'm going to just, like I say, keep it kind of loose. And I'm going to use a little bit of the dark color now, as dark as I can go, and do a couple of these really dark shapes that are right here. Probably need a little bit darker still. This is not as dark as I could go. Start with that. Kind of change that shape, as you can see. I'll throw a little bit more of this really dark brown, just more concentrated. Like that, and then there's another dark shape right here. Kind of joins it almost. Might even take a little bit of that. Maybe it was a bit darker at one edge of the palette. I don't know. I'm gonna put a tiny tap of that really dark color onto these. Just like that, and then put a little bit of it into, I can see it kind of comes along the bottom edge of this, and then a little bit on here. Again, I'm trying to not overthink or overwork this, so I'm not doing the details as refined as if I was trying to be photorealistic, even though you probably argue that this is getting to be photorealistic. Try and loosen up, Jessica. Try and loosen up. Now, I'm not really liking how his beak is looking. I might just put another, just rub it a little bit, and maybe put another coat of something on here. I could maybe tap a tiny bit of a peachy kind of coral color on his beak. What if I take a tiny little bit of quinacridone rose, tiny bit, mix it into my brown here. Oof, that's way too pink still. I'm gonna take some off on my paper towel. Maybe a little wasteful. Just so I have like a small hint of that pinky color, barely any. Just so we can put a tiny little bit of that kind of pinky coral color on his beak. And kind of put it on the middle, and then I'll use water and just soften it. So just kind of tap it around, tap the water around so that it gets just this slight hint of that pinky color. I don't know. I think it's kind of pretty, to be honest, that slight pink, and it harmonizes a little bit with the flowers, so I'm okay with that. I might even just go ahead with what's left on my palette here and just drop a tiny little bit. I'm trying to move my palette down a little bit. Try and drop a little bit of that color onto his feet, and yes, we have to get a lot more detail, but we'll just stick that on there for now, because I do see that pinky color. It doesn't need to be that color in my mind, but why not? And then for the eye, I'm going to be using some of this really dark purpley blue color in here. Might even put a little bit of brown with it. Do both colors. And the main thing I want to do when I work on his eye is to make sure I leave the highlight bigger than I think I need, because you can always make a highlight smaller. It's a lot harder to make it larger. So I always say make your highlight too big, because you can shrink it later. And just come around it. Try and paint that dark area in. Like that. I'm going to bring black a little bit like that. I think I'm okay with that for now. And I can come in and work around his eye after. I'm going to let that dry though a little bit, because a little bit more rounded. I don't want to have anything bleed out of his eye right now. Oh, I hope I didn't just mess up his eye too much. I'm just gonna let his eye dry now for a minute. And then I'm gonna come and just tap a little bit more brown, kind of along the edges of his feet, just so that we get a little bit of almost like shadow on the underside. So I'm gonna have a little case of the shakes. Okay, that was not too great. Let's try this again. Little case of the shakes when I'm on the underside of all of these little toes. Give them a little bit of texture. I'd probably come in and do a little bit of texture on top, but this is just kind of the first bit of shadow here. And then I'll kind of blend it around. Okay, we need that one. Let's do a little bit to the talons too. Let's just go. I'm working with a small brush, and I'm so zoomed in, you're gonna see all my errors here. Probably it won't show as bad when you look at it just a normal life size here. going to tap a little bit of water now along the shadow side so it kind of blends. Maybe put a little bit of water. And you can see I'm kind of trying to be a little bit shaky jiggly as I do this so that I get a little bit of texture or just the effect that his feet kind of have that texture the bird feet have, right? Tapping a little bit more dark. Ooh, kind of did a wonky thing there. Try and fix it. Good enough, actually. Now I'm thinking to add a little more detail to the flowers, and I think I'll use the softer brushes, maybe the 6 and 8 Artegria, and I'll drop in more like creases and folds, and then I'll come in and add some centers to them after. So I'll just come in with this color first. I just have to be really careful as I do this. I don't cross into his eyes, so I'll try and hold myself down low over here. And I'll put just some lines here. So this is that same kind of pinky purple color. And then I'll just soften them with my water brush. So I'll see what all I do with the detail. I need more water on my paintbrush as well. I want it a little looser. Basically just do a little bit of something like so. Just my water brush now to do this one. Ooh, that's a lot. I'll just soften that. You can see I'm not putting it everywhere. The water, I'm trying to get a little bit of a loose effect. Again, this is a little bit of a different way for my style of painting. Something like that. Then I'm going to come in with, I'll come down here, do the same thing. Okay, that's so dark, I need to get soft. I got to get water on it pretty quick. I might put extra paint kind of in the center of the flower, but I'm just going to do a little bit of this. I'm not going to come right to the edge of this one. I'm going to paint this area where it's folded over. I'm going to go a little darker here. A little bit more darkness here. Again, I'm getting a little bit picky, so I'm going to have to move a little bit faster. Just going to put some water on these, and I'm going to make it a little bit darker on this side of the fold because that petal above there is folded. So it's kind of a little bit of a blend of wet on wet and wet on dry. A little bit of an extra petal there. Don't know if I like that. I might just add water. Okay, now with these ones, I'm just going to put a little bit in the center of each of these and then soften them. Almost as if I'm doing the center, kind of the stamen, but I'm not. I'm not doing them yet. I'm going to do them right away here. And maybe in some of these shapes, I'll add a little water to my paintbrush and then just do the areas that are kind of like folded over to put them a bit darker. Something like that. I don't know. Just put a little bit of something in here. Again, almost like the center of a flower. This one was the one that wasn't as flowery looking at the beginning, but I'll just soften that. I'm going to call that good for now, and then I'll come in and add just a few little details after. So super loose flowers today. I think I just want to add a very tiny bit of detail with this green, not too much. So maybe like on half of the leaf. So it's like one half of the leaf is a bit darker than the other. Nothing too crazy. Don't want to make it contrived. I don't want them to look like I've cloned them all. So we'll play. We'll see what we can do with this dark green. Some of them I might not even add anything extra to it. I actually kind of feel like these ones up here, I'm going to just turn it around and do a tiny little bit, like almost make them a lighter green and expand the leaf a little bit, if that makes sense. It's almost like the darker green is what's there, and then I'm coming on top with a little bit of light. But I'm doing it upside down because I feel like I might have better control of the brush. Do I like that? I don't know. Having a little bit of light green back there, I think, helps. Whether it had to be right on the leaf, I don't know. Just add another leaf like so. Just kind of fill it in a little bit. I'll just kind of go like this into this one. It's darker and lighter. Really don't know if I like what I did back there, so give it a little bit of variation. And I'm happier with that, I think. Just tap a little dark into some of these. Might even go in with a bit of my brown. Just makes the green look a little less artificial. Maybe I'll just tweak the branch a little bit, just come in with a little more dark. I still have to come in and do those final tweaks to the eye as well, or I should say the feathers right around the eye. And then I got to add just a few details to the little flowers. Just putting a bit of darker brown onto the branch and just working wet on dry and giving it kind of a wood look. So pretty loose and simple here. I might even just put the smallest amount of that bluish color that we have over here. I'm gonna put maybe a tiny bit of that into the, that's a little bit much. I want just a little bit of that into the shadow side of this branch, just for harmony, not too much. I'll tap a little bit of water. There. Then I can come in and do a few details around his eye. So I'm using the dark brown with my number 3. And you can kind of see he's kind of got a little bit of darkness, almost like it forms a ring in some areas around his eye. So I'm just going to put that on here. I'm just refining the edges or the areas around his eye. I'm mostly happy with them, but there's just a few spots that I feel like I could tweak. I'm going to dilute the paint now, use mostly water, but fill this in because I feel like, okay, just get a bit darker now in here. And I always play it safe by not overdoing it at the beginning. You were probably going, are you going to fill that in? And that's a good question, but I always prefer to like err on the side of not overdoing it when I'm working close to the eye. Okay, dropping a little bit of that bluish color in here, tiny bit. I think I'm happy. Feels like maybe he could have had a little bit more of a light area around the top of his eye. I kind of lost a little bit right there, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to like pull that back. I'll try it with the number 6. You can't, have to be very careful if you're going to try and pick anything at this point. I'm not sure if it's a good idea to try and lift. It's coming a little bit right there. You see how he's kind of got a lighter area above his eye? Could probably even be a little higher than what I'm going, but so I'm just kind of tapping my brush off on my paper towel so I'm not getting too much of that blending around. I can always add a few feathers on top of that when it's dry. Otherwise, I'm going to come in and do some little stamen on these flowers just so we have a little something to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the number 6 this time and do a few little taps with it, and then I'll use the 3 with some water to create the little stamens. Let's see, I'll show you what I mean. So I'll put like a few taps like this. So that's the stamen. And then these are the little, are they filaments that hold it? A little bit, those, and then water, kind of bring it to the center. It's okay. Some of them are a little bit botched looking. So these ones, I don't want to overdo it. Let's do fewer. Come around here and just pull these towards the center. Do a few of these. So I'm just going to speed the video up as I go around and tap these stamen on each flower since it's pretty repetitive. So I'm just tapping that darker color on and then using my smaller brush with water to create the filaments. Oh, we can refine these ones a bit as they're drying. There. And then what I think I'll do is just really quickly come in here and put that just a tiny touch, a tap of brown just in here. I actually don't mind it too bad. Now what I'm going to do is just put maybe the odd tiny bit of detail into here, not much. I feel like I could just tap a tiny bit, just a tiny bit. I know I have a temptation to overwork things, so I gotta be really careful here. Put a few darker taps of color. And maybe what I'll do is just tap a tiny bit of color right under here. I feel like something is like, almost feels like it's a bit disjointed from his body for some reason. It does to me. I know in the photo it seems like it's not disjointed, but I'm just gonna put a tiny bit of color under here and see if I can figure out where. Yeah, it probably just needs to come up in a few spots. Just refine things just a smidgen. Just feels like it's almost, I say almost disjointed or something, these two sections. So I'm just rubbing a little bit of brown, just bring it together quick. Yeah, I like that. And I don't even mind the fact I don't have a whole lot of feathers in there that are detailed. I kind of like him just the way he is. So I think I'm going to call that good. Thank you so very much for joining me for today's tutorial. And I hope it brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life. That you have a blessed Easter celebration and that you've been inspired to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.